We're on the lookout for sponsors to join us on our incredible journey with Inspired Change with Gunter. If your organisation cares deeply about meaningful conversations around masculinity, self-development and mental health, we'd love to partner with you. Our podcast has a wonderful, dedicated audience committed to personal growth and positive social change. By sponsoring Inspired Change with Gunter, your brand will connect with listeners who truly value thoughtful discussion and support initiatives that promote real transformation. We're incredibly proud to be ranked number 1 in Australia and number 5 in the USA on FeedSpot's top men's mental health podcasts. For more information on how to become a sponsor, please reach out to Miranda Spiegner Sapon, our showrunner and executive producer. We'd love to explore how we can work together to inspire change. Now, thank you for your continued support, and let's keep inspiring change together.
You're listening to Inspire Change, a broadcast that strives to educate, motivate, and empower men to challenge traditions of masculinity. To guide us through the intricacies and intersections of emotions, relationships, and male identity is renowned psychologist, author, and speaker Gunter Swoboda. This is Inspire Change.
Before I begin the actual podcast, I would like to respectfully acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, who are the traditional custodians of the land on which I work. I would also like to pay my respects to their elders past and present. Welcome everybody to another episode of Inspired Change with Gunter. Welcome everybody to another episode of Inspired Change with Gunter. Obviously, as part of my research at the moment, I am going through a stack of literature. And I ran across something seriously interesting. And it's led me to want to talk about it because on the surface, it sounds very optimistic, but in the wrong hands, it could become naive. And that is that the idea that human beings are basically decent. Now, what am I talking about? I'm talking about a guy who's been getting a fair amount of airtime called Rutger Bregman. And he has actually made that case really well, especially in his book, Humankind, A Hopeful History. And for those of you interested in that sort of work, I highly recommend it. His argument, in essence, is that we have told ourselves the wrong story about human nature. And that story becomes the blueprint for the institutions we build. Sound familiar? Yeah, of course it is. That's what I've been talking about in Making Good Men Great. So, at the macro level, I really agree with the point that he makes. But I also want to make in essence, a clinical distinction that matters, especially if you work with men, or if you are a man, or if you love one. And that point is that decency is not always the issue. Access to it is. Now, Bregman targets the cultural addiction to cynicism, the story that people are selfish, that civilizations are thin layer, and that under pressure we revert to brutality. Think Lord of the Flies. There's many versions of that story. There's also essentially, the evolutionary psychology model of, underneath, in essence, we're dominated by, our evolution, and which was primitive and brutish. I might be giving evolutionary psychology a bad press here, but there is an overtone of that. It's a bit like, the alpha male, the dog eat dog scenario. And I'm definitely critical of that. So that story has consequences. Now, if you believe fundamentally that people are basically selfish, you build a surveillance heavy, punishment heavy system. And more importantly, you also justify your own hardness. Think MAGA. Okay? And so, in this context, we need to throw in some critical thinking, especially given the fact that men in particular have been trained to take cynicism often as maturity. It always puzzles me how that leap of illogic comes to fruition. In that, there is a certain masculine posture that says, I'm not sentimental, I'm realistic. That posture often looks like strength, but it mostly functions as an armor. Now, in essence, this is where I begin to depart from the usual hopeful history type. I don't think the main barrier is that men simply believe the wrong thing about humanity. The deeper barrier is that many men have been trained into a narrow emotional operating system where hope, tenderness, and decency carry a social risk. Look at the current social debates that we're having. Elon Musk's perception that empathy is a weakness, is flawed, and is going to be the downfall of civilization. What a load of nonsense. So, even if we try to persuade men philosophically or intellectually, inside our being, inside part of our nervous system in a way, and part of our identity, that notion is vetoed. There's an immediate reaction, a defensiveness to it. So in my work through Making Good Men Great, and in my thesis writing and in the book that I'm working on, as you know, I treat patriarchy less as a political slogan and more as an internalized moral economy. It is a set of values that gets installed early and then enforced through shame. So think about it like this. Many men walk around with an internal judge that links worth to competence, control, and self-sufficiency. It doesn't say be evil. It says don't be weak. It says handle it. It says stay on top of things. It says if you need help, you fundamentally have failed. Now, if that's the internal code, decency can be present but not be accessible. Not because the man has no conscience, but because the cost of softening, of becoming more vulnerable, more, in a sense, in old language, more like feminine, feels like a loss of status. And for many men, status loss feels like annihilation. It's an existential crisis. So I want to translate Bergman's humans are decent into a clinical question. If humans are decent, why do so many men struggle to show it in the very moments that matter most? Conflict, intimacy, fatherhood, and grief, and in therapy. And the answer is not that men are bad. The answer is men have been trained to protect rank and competence at the expense of connection. That protection becomes automatic. Think about the politicking that goes on within corporations, where politics are a fundamental driver for a lot of people's behaviour. In fact, for most people's behaviour, especially if we're looking at public service, bureaucracies like that, and corporations. So you might want to ask, why is therapy a decisive sign of change? Well, Bregman speaks primarily at the level of institutions of public life. His message is, build systems that assume the best. I'm interested in what happens when a man enters a room with another human being and the old moral economy switches on. And interestingly is that in therapy, we see the mechanisms in real time. Like the minimizing joke, the polished story that never touches feelings, the irritation when the therapist asks a simple question, the sudden impulse to prove competence, the need to control the frame. This is also where therapists need to be honest with themselves. Men don't bring patriarchy into therapy alone. Therapists can carry it too. And it shows up as a counter-transference pressure. The pull to look competent, to rescue, to take charge, to avoid uncertainty, to win the interaction rather than staying relationally present. So psychotherapy becomes one of those few places where masculinity is not debated as ideology, but encountered as a lived organisation. It is also one of the few places where a man can have a different experience of being seen without being shamed. That's not a soft point. It's a rigorous point. In my view, men change when he can bear the changes. He can bear feelings, he can bear not knowing, he can bear repair. You know, what are the ruptures in my life that I can repair? What can he bear? Can he bear being influenced? And that, for those of you who are listening, is a doorway into decency becoming behaviour and not just belief. Bregman has moved recently into a language of moral ambition. The idea there is that people should stop wasting their talent and orient their lives towards meaningful contributions. I like that. But there is a trap, especially for us as men. If I, as a man, have not dealt with the internal judge, moral ambition can become moralised achievement. It's another ladder in a rung, another performance, another way to stay defended while appearing virtuous. It's another defence. And it links ambition with worth. Now you can spot this easily. The man who wants to do good but can't apologise. This is the man who champions causes but cannot tolerate intimacy, vulnerability. The man who speaks about ethics but cannot sit with grief. The man who is publicly admirable and privately unreachable. So the sequence in this matters, and it matters greatly. So first, repair access to vulnerability and relational accountability. Then ambition can become service rather than status. And I think if you look around the political arena, this is a fundamental issue. So what's the practical bridge here? Now, we need sort of three moves to restore access, in my view. Others may not agree. That's okay. I think an open discourse around this is really important. So let me line that up for you the way that I see it. Firstly, we need to name the internal rule. Now, some of you might already get the hint, there's a pattern here. Okay, well, you're right. But bear with me. Listen to the end. When you feel yourself hardening, ask, what is the rule here? Is it don't be weak, don't be needy, don't lose, don't look stupid? Put it into a clear, concrete sentence. That sentence is the doorway. Now, secondly, practice shame tolerance in small doses. Now, some psychotherapists might disagree with this, but again, bear with me. Listen to this and listen between the lines. I want you to choose one small moment a day where you do something that risks mild embarrassment, but is honest. A text that says, I'm not okay, a request for help, an apology without explanation, small, repeated. This is what retrains the system. Okay, when I speak about the system, I'm talking about the whole human being, physically, emotionally, cognitively, and socially. Remember, we're not an island unto ourselves. Now, third, as I said, and this is really, I'm going to stress this point, make this decency concrete. Bregman is right that people can be decent, but decency is not a worldview, it's a behavior under pressure. So pick one relationship and one repair, one conversation you've been avoiding, one truth that you've been dodging, one responsibility you have displaced. Do that. So in wrapping this up, and this is possibly a bit shorter than my usual podcast, but if you're really keen, go to my Patreon site and take a look and follow the exercise that I do there in much more depth. My synthesis of Bregman is that he's right to challenge the cultural romance with cynicism. But in my clinical world, the problem is often not that men lack decency. The problem is that decency is locked behind shame and status defense. Part of that is the patriarchal introject and the masculine introject with which we have been socialized. So most of it, a lot of it is unconscious. And what I'm looking at doing is helping you to draw that material from the unconscious ultimately into the conscious mind so that you can act with intention. And it's this that makes psychotherapy something that really truly matters for change. It's where masculinity stops being a slogan or a tray and becomes something that we can work with breath by breath, sentence by sentence, repair by repair. It is that process. Now, as I said, if this has landed, I've built a Patreon exercise that goes deeper. It's not motivational. It's somewhat diagnostic, and it's definitely practical. So if you want some change in this, right, and then inspire change, let's go and do the work. And this is me, Gunter, your host, signing off until next time. On this show, we talk a lot about living with purpose, slowing down, paying attention, and being intentional about the choices we make every day. Because when we simplify the noise around us, we can better hear what really matters. Empathy, connection, and showing up as the best version of ourselves. That's why I'm genuinely pleased to welcome our newest sponsor, Distill Union. Their philosophy aligns beautifully with what we do here. Distill Union creates slick, thoughtfully designed essentials, wallets, key organizers, phone cases, all built with a less is more approach. Their Wally wallets, Ferris key organizers, these are everyday tools that make life easier, cleaner, and calmer. In that simplicity, there's space for clarity.
this space change. As a thank you to our Inspire Change community, they're offering 20% off any product with the promo code Inspire Change. Have a look, try them out, and see how simplifying your day can open the door to something deeper. Visit distilledunion.com and enjoy 20% off any product with the promo code Inspire Change. That's distilledunion.com with promo code Inspire Change to check out.
Hello to all of our listeners. We thank you for tuning in and promoting positive social change. This makes you a part of Gunter's efforts in transforming not only men's lives, but lives in general, and we are grateful you have joined us. This week, for our global listeners list, we would like to share our gratitude with our listeners in Singapore. You made it to number 10 on our global listeners list for the very first time. And to our listeners in the USA, we want to congratulate Texas for reaching number 2 on the top USA listeners list. A special shout out to our listeners in Houston, Corpus Christi, Cedar Hill, Austin, New Boston, Deer Park, Round Rock, LaPorte, and our showrunner's hometown of Pasadena.
Congratulations!
We thank you so much for your continued support, and we appreciate your efforts to support positive social change. Please remember, if you want to share your story of social change, feel free to reach out to our show directly. Please see the show notes for our contact information. As always, thank you to each and every one of our listeners, and most importantly, please keep inspiring positive social change.
Love to hear from you. And if you're interested, please check out my work on www.guntersvoboda.com or www.goodmengreat.com.
Thank you for listening to Inspire Change, a broadcast that strives to educate, motivate, and empower men to challenge traditions of masculinity. For more information on the Making Good Men Great movement, or for individual or group coaching sessions with Gunter, visit goodmengreat.com.